Lieutenant Kenji Matsuoka stood in the rain at Kure Naval Arsenal, staring at something that should not exist. The submarine stretched 122 meters along the dock, longer than a destroyer, nearly as long as a cruiser. But what made his hand shake was the bulge in the hull forward of the conning tower. A bulge large enough to hide 3 aircraft inside a submarine. Matsuoka was 23 years old. He had 400 hours of flight time. 2 weeks ago, his commanding officer had called him into a windowless office and told him he was being transferred to a special weapons program. Top secret. No details. Just pack your gear and report to Kure. Now he understood why they would not tell him anything over the phone. Because if someone had described this to him, he would have thought they were insane. Captain Tatsusuke Ariazumi walked up beside him. The captain was 38 years old, with gray hair at his temples and hands that never stopped moving. He had designed this submarine, spent 14 months building it, lost 11 workers in construction accidents. And now he was looking at Matsuoka like a man sizing up a weapon he was not sure would work. "You are going to fly your aircraft off that submarine," Ariazumi said. "Not as a question, as fact." Matsuoka stared at the bulge in the hull. "Sir, how does an aircraft launch from inside a submarine?" Ariazumi smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Come inside, I will show you." They climbed down a ladder into the hangar. The space was 37 meters long and completely sealed with watertight doors at both ends. 3 aircraft sat inside. Aichi M6A Siran floatplane bombers, each one disassembled and folded like origami. Wings collapsed against the fuselage, floats removed, tail sections detached. Matsuoka had never seen anything like it. "How long to assemble one of these?" he asked. Ariazumi checked his watch. 28 minutes for all 3 aircraft. "We have done it 40 times in training. The record is 26 minutes. But that was in calm seas with no enemy aircraft searching for us." Matsuoka walked around the first Siran. The folding wing mechanism looked fragile. The float attachment points were held by 4 bolts each. The engine cowling was dented in 3 places. "This aircraft has been flown?" he asked. Ariazumi nodded. 67 test flights. It handles poorly in crosswinds. The engine overheats if you push it past 280 miles per hour. The bomb release mechanism freezes at altitude about 30% of the time. Matsuoka stared at him. "And I am supposed to fly this into combat?" Ariazumi met his eyes. "You are supposed to fly this into the Panama Canal, drop a 1,800-pound bomb on the Gatun locks, then ditch in the ocean and hope the submarine can pick you up before you drown or the Americans find you." The words hit Matsuoka like a physical blow. The Panama Canal, the most defended waterway in the Western Hemisphere, protected by dozens of anti-aircraft batteries, patrolled by American fighters 24 hours a day, and he was supposed to attack it in a float plane that could barely fly straight. "Sir, this is a suicide mission." Ariazumi did not blink. "Yes, it is. But if you succeed, you cut the Panama Canal for 6 months. The American 2 Ocean Navy is split in half. Carriers in the Atlantic cannot reinforce the Pacific. We get 6 months to rebuild our forces. 6 months to force a negotiated peace. Your life, your aircraft, your mission, in exchange for 6 months. That is the deal." Matsuoka said nothing, because what could he say? He had just been told he was going to die. Not maybe die, not probably die, definitely die. The only question was whether his death would accomplish anything. Ariazumi gestured to the other 2 Seiran aircraft. "These are your wingmen. Lieutenant Hideaki Tanaka, 24 years old, 380 flight hours, and Lieutenant Akira Yamada, 22 years old, 290 flight hours. They know the mission. They know the odds. They have all written their final letters home. Have you? December 7th, 1942, 6 months earlier. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto sat alone in his cabin aboard battleship Yamato, writing the proposal that would create I-400. Outside his window, the war was being lost one battle at a time. Midway, Guadalcanal, the Coral Sea. Each defeat smaller than the last, but adding up to a pattern that terrified him. Because Yamamoto had lived in America, studied at Harvard, traveled from California to New York. He had seen American factories, American oil fields, American railroads. He understood American industrial capacity in ways his colleagues refused to accept, and that knowledge was killing him. Because Japan could not win a war of production. American shipyards were building carriers faster than Japan could sink them. By 1943, America would have 15 new Essex-class carriers operational, 15 carriers in less than 2 years. Japan had lost 4 carriers at Midway and would need 5 years to replace them. The mathematics were simple and brutal. So Yamamoto did what he always did when conventional warfare failed. He looked for the unconventional solution. The proposal on his desk had been submitted by Captain Ariazumi 3 weeks ago, Underwater Aircraft Carrier Project. The title alone sounded like science fiction. Build a submarine large enough to carry aircraft. Sail that submarine across 5,000 miles of ocean undetected. Surface off the coast of America. Launch aircraft, strike the Panama Canal, destroy the locks, then submerge and escape before American forces could respond. It was insane. It was impossible. It was Japan's only chance. Yamamoto signed the proposal and stamped it with his personal seal. Then he picked up the phone and called Captain Ariazumi. "Your submarine is approved," he said. "You have 14 months to build it." Ariazumi's voice came back uncertain. "Admiral, 14 months is impossible." "Then do the impossible," Yamamoto said. "Because if this weapon does not work, Japan has no other options left." He hung up before Ariazumi could respond, because there was nothing more to say. Japan was going to build the largest submarine in history, arm it with aircraft, and bet everything on one desperate strike against America. It was madness, but madness was all they had left. January 15th, 1943, Kure Naval Arsenal. Construction began on I-400 with a keel-laying ceremony that lasted 6 minutes. No speeches, no photographs, no journalists, just Ariazumi and 2,000 workers who had been told that if they discussed this project with anyone, they would be shot. The keel was 122 meters long, longer than anything Ariazumi had ever built. The pressure hull would be welded from steel plates 30 millimeters thick. The hangar would be sealed with rubber gaskets and steel doors that could withstand 100 meters of water pressure. And the entire submarine had to be operational in 14 months. Ariazumi knew this was impossible. Standard submarine construction took 24 to 30 months, but Admiral Yamamoto had not asked for standard. He had asked for impossible. So, Ariazumi did something that violated every safety regulation in the Imperial Navy. He ordered 24-hour construction shifts, 3 shifts of workers, 8 hours each, no days off, no holidays, just welding and riveting and assembly 7 days a week for 14 months straight. The accident started in the second week. A welder named Takeda fell 15 meters from scaffolding. His safety harness broke. He hit the concrete floor and died before the medics arrived. Ariazumi stood over the body and made a decision. They would not stop construction. They would not slow down. They would not even hold a funeral until the submarine was finished, because 11 more workers would die before I-400 was launched. And Ariazumi would personally write letters to each family explaining that their son or husband or father had died building the weapon that would save Japan. But in March 1943, disaster struck. The chief engineer, Commander Takahashi, came to Ariazumi's office at 2 in the morning. He was holding calculations that made no sense. "Admiral, we have a problem with the catapult system. When we fire the catapult, the recoil will roll the submarine 8 to 12 degrees. That makes launching a second or third aircraft impossible without restabilizing the boat, and restabilization takes 15 minutes. Ariazumi stared at the numbers. This was catastrophic. The entire mission depended on launching 3 aircraft in rapid succession, overwhelming the target with multiple simultaneous attacks. But if the submarine had to stabilize between launches, the mission time stretched from 30 minutes to over an hour on the surface, an hour vulnerable to American patrol aircraft, an hour that turned a surgical strike into a suicide mission for the submarine crew as well as the pilots. "How do we fix this?" Ariazumi asked. Takahashi spread blueprints across the desk. "We add counterbalance tanks on the opposite side of the catapult. When we fire, we simultaneously flood the tanks. The weight offsets the recoil. The submarine stays level." Ariazumi studied the blueprints. This added 6 weeks to construction, maybe 8. They were already behind schedule. Adding more weeks meant they would miss Admiral Yamamoto's deadline. But there was no choice. A submarine that could only launch 1 aircraft was worthless. "Make it work," Ariazumi said, "and tell the crews we are going to 4-hour shifts instead of 8. Everyone works twice as long until this submarine is finished." April 18th, 1943. The news reached Kure Naval Arsenal at noon. Admiral Yamamoto was dead. American P-38 fighters had ambushed his transport aircraft over Bougainville Island. They shot him down deliberately. The architect of Pearl Harbor, the man who approved I-400, the only person in the Imperial Navy who understood why this weapon mattered. Dead. Ariazumi stood in his office, reading the telegram 3 times. Then he walked out onto the construction floor, where 2,000 workers were welding the pressure hull of I-400. He did not stop construction. He did not give a speech. He just went back to work, because Admiral Yamamoto was dead. But his submarine was not finished yet. November 30th, 1943. I-400 was launched at Kure Naval Arsenal. The submarine slid into the water with no ceremony, no drums, no prayers. Just Ariazumi standing on the dock, watching his creation settle into the harbor. She displaced 5,223 tons. She carried 144 men. She could travel 3,750 miles without refueling, and she carried 3 aircraft that could strike the Panama Canal. Ariazumi had done the impossible. He had built the submarine in 14 months. But Admiral Yamamoto was not there to see it, and the new naval command had very different ideas about how to use this weapon. February 1944. Captain Ariazumi received new orders. I-400 would not attack the Panama Canal. The new command argued it was too risky. The submarine might be detected. The aircraft might fail. 3 bombs might not destroy the locks. So they changed the mission. I-400 would attack American carrier anchorages instead. Find where carriers gathered between operations. Surface. Launch aircraft. Sink carriers. Then escape. The logic was simple. Carriers were easier targets than concrete locks, and sinking even 2 carriers would disrupt American operations for months. But this meant everything Ariazumi had trained for was obsolete. New mission planning, new training, new tactics. He spent 6 months retraining his crew for a mission they would never fly. Because while I-400 sat in port waiting for orders, the war continued going badly. The Americans captured Saipan, then Guam, Then the Philippines. American B-29 bombers started flying from the Marianas to burn Japanese cities. And I-400, the submarine that was supposed to change the war, never left port. July 1945. Lieutenant Kenji Matsuoka sat in the Siren cockpit running pre-flight checks for the 89th time. The war was obviously lost. Everyone knew it. But the Imperial Command refused to surrender. They wanted one final mission, one last strike to prove Japan could still hurt America. And that mission had finally arrived. But it was not the Panama Canal. It was not carrier anchorages. The final mission was something else, something that would make Matsuoka wish he had died in training. Because the 3 Siren aircraft were being loaded with something far worse than bombs. March 26, 1945. A windowless conference room deep inside the Imperial Navy headquarters in Tokyo. Lieutenant Kenji Matsuoka sat at a table with 11 other pilots staring at a man who should not have been there. General Shiro Ishii, age 53, commander of Unit 731. The Biological Warfare Research Division that officially did not exist. Ishii wore a medical officer's uniform, but his eyes belonged to someone who had stopped seeing human beings as human years ago. Ishii placed a sealed glass cylinder on the table. Inside, thousands of fleas crawled over each other in a black, writhing mass. These fleas have been feeding on rats infected with Yersinia pestis, Ishii said. Bubonic plague, the same disease that killed 1/3 of Europe in the 14th century. Each flea carries enough bacteria to infect 10 people. This cylinder contains approximately 30,000 fleas. That means 300,000 potential infections. And we have prepared 150 of these cylinders for your mission. Matsuoka felt his stomach turn over. He looked at the other pilots. They were all staring at the cylinder like it was a live grenade. Lieutenant Tanaka raised his hand. "Sir, what exactly is our mission?" Ishii smiled. "You are going to fly your Siren aircraft to San Diego, California. You will crash your aircraft into the city at multiple points. The cylinders will rupture on impact. The fleas will disperse. Within 2 weeks, bubonic plague will spread throughout Southern California. Within a month, 100,000 Americans will be dead. Maybe more. The panic will be total. War production will collapse. America will be forced to negotiate peace." The room went silent. Matsuoka felt like someone had punched him in the chest. This was not a military mission. This was biological terrorism. "You want us to deliberately infect civilians with plague?" he asked. Ishii looked at him with no expression. "The Americans fire-bombed Tokyo and killed 100,000 civilians in one night. They are preparing to invade Japan and kill millions more. This is war, Lieutenant. We use every weapon available. You have been selected because you are expendable. Young, unmarried, no children. Your deaths will be regrettable but necessary. You will be remembered as heroes who saved Japan." But Lieutenant Hideaki Tanaka stood up. His hands were shaking. "Sir, with respect, this is murder. Not combat, murder. Biological weapons are banned by the Geneva Convention. If we do this, we become war criminals." Ishii stared at him. "Sit down, Lieutenant." Tanaka did not sit. "No, sir. I will not participate in this mission. Court-martial me if you want. Execute me if you want. But I will not murder civilians with plague." 2 other pilots stood up, then 3 more. Within seconds, half the pilots in the room were standing in silent protest. Ishii did not raise his voice. He simply gestured to the guards at the door. The guards raised their rifles. "Anyone who refuses this mission will be executed for insubordination. You have 10 seconds to sit down." The standing pilots looked at each other. Then slowly, one by one, they sat down. All except Tanaka. He remained standing, staring at Ishii. 10 seconds passed. Ishii nodded to the guards. "Take Lieutenant Tanaka outside, 1 shot to the head." The guards grabbed Tanaka and dragged him toward the door. He did not resist. He just looked at Matsuoka. "Do not do this," he said. "This is not war. This is genocide." The door closed. 5 seconds later, a single gunshot echoed down the hallway. Ishii looked at the remaining pilots. Anyone else have objections? No one moved. No one spoke. "Good," Ishii said. "You will depart in 3 days. Captain Ariazumi will brief you on operational details. Remember, you are saving Japan. Your emperor is counting on you." He picked up the cylinder of plague fleas and walked out. The pilots sat in silence. Matsuoka stared at his hands. They were shaking so badly he could not make them stop. That night, Matsuoka sat in his barracks writing a letter he would never send. "Dear Mother and Father, I am writing to tell you something I can never tell you. I have been ordered to commit an act that will make me a monster, not a soldier, a monster. I am supposed to crash my aircraft into an American city carrying biological weapons that will kill thousands of civilians, women, children, people who have nothing to do with this war. I have been told this is necessary, that this will save Japan. But I do not believe that. I believe this is the act of desperate men who have already lost and refuse to accept it." He stopped writing. Because what was the point? He could not send this letter. If the military police found it, he would be shot. And even if he could send it, what would his parents think? That their son was a coward, a traitor, or would they understand that some orders are too evil to follow? Matsuoka crumpled the letter and burned it in the barrack stove. Then he lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling until dawn. March 28, 1945, Kure Naval Arsenal. I-400 was being loaded for the mission. Matsuoka stood on the dock watching workers carry the plague cylinders into the submarine's hangar. Each cylinder was packed in foam rubber to prevent breakage during transit. The cylinders would be attached to the Siren aircraft just before launch. The pilots would arm them manually, and when the aircraft crashed, the cylinders would rupture and release 30,000 plague-infected fleas into an American city. Captain Ariazumi walked over to Matsuoka. "You look like you are going to be sick," he said. Matsuoka did not look at him. "Sir, this mission is wrong." Ariazumi nodded slowly. "Yes, it is." "Then why are we doing it?" Matsuoka asked. Ariazumi stared at the submarine. "Because we lost the war 2 years ago, and nobody had the courage to admit it. So now we are so desperate we are willing to do anything, even this, even biological warfare against civilians, because the alternative is admitting that we were wrong, that Pearl Harbor was wrong, that this entire war was wrong, and Japan will never admit that." "Do you believe this mission will save Japan?" Matsuoka asked. Ariazumi looked at him. "No, I believe this mission will kill 100,000 Americans, and then America will drop more atomic bombs on Japan until there is nothing left but ash and ghosts. But we have our orders, and we are going to follow them, because that is what soldiers do, even when the orders are monstrous." He walked away. Matsuoka stood alone on the dock, watching the plague cylinders disappear into the submarine. He thought about Lieutenant Tanaka, shot in the head for refusing to participate. He thought about his parents. Who would receive a telegram saying their son died a hero? But he would not die a hero. He would die a mass murderer, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. April 15, 1945. I-400 departed Kure Naval Arsenal at 0400 hours. No ceremony, no flags, no crowds, just the submarine sliding into the darkness and submerging. Matsuoka stood in the hangar staring at the 3 sarin aircraft. They looked like normal bombers. But underneath each aircraft, where the bombs should be, were 12 cylinders of plague-infected fleas. 360 cylinders total. 10.8 million fleas. Enough to infect every person in Los Angeles twice over. The submarine headed east toward the Mariana Islands. The plan was to avoid American submarine patrols by staying deep during the day and only surfacing at night to recharge batteries. The crossing would take 28 days. Then I-400 would approach the California coast under cover of darkness. Surface 50 miles offshore, launch the 3 aircraft. The pilots would fly to San Diego, crash into the city at different points, die on impact, and release the plague. It was a perfect plan, except for one problem. Nobody on the submarine wanted to do it. April 22nd, 1945, 7 days into the voyage. Matsuoka was in his bunk when Lieutenant Akira Yamada climbed down from the bunk above him. "We need to talk," Yamada whispered. "Not here. Follow me." They went to the torpedo room where nobody could overhear. Yamada looked like he had not slept in days. "I cannot do this mission," he said. "I have been thinking about it for 7 days straight. This is not war. This is terrorism. We are going to kill 100,000 people who have nothing to do with the military. Women, children, babies. And for what? Japan is already losing. This will not change that. This will just make us monsters." "What do you want me to do about it?" Matsuoka asked. Yamada grabbed his arm. "We sabotage the mission. We break the plague cylinders now. Dump the fleas into the ocean. When we reach California, we tell Ariazumi the containers were damaged during the voyage. We still fly the mission, but without the biological weapons. We die like soldiers instead of terrorists." Matsuoka stared at him. "If they discover we sabotage the mission, they will execute us." Yamada laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We are already dead. We are flying suicide missions. The only question is whether we die as men or monsters. I choose men." Matsuoka thought about it for 10 seconds. Then he nodded. "Okay, we do it tonight. But we need to make it look like an accident, a pressure leak, something that ruptured the containers during deep diving." Yamada smiled for the first time in days. "I can make that happen. I worked on submarine systems for 2 years before pilot training. Tonight, 0200 hours. The night watch will be minimal. We break the containers, release the fleas into the bilge, pump them overboard. By morning, the plague is gone, and nobody can prove it was sabotage." But as they turned to leave the torpedo room, Captain Ariazumi stepped out of the shadows. He had been listening the entire time. His face showed no expression. "You are planning to sabotage the mission," he said. Not a question, a statement. Yamada and Matsuoka said nothing. There was nothing to say. They had been caught. Ariazumi should have called the guards, should have had them arrested, should have had them shot, but he did not. Instead, he walked over to the torpedo tubes and sat down. "Tell me something," he said. "If you sabotage this mission, what happens next?" Matsuoka found his voice. "Sir, we still complete the mission. We fly to San Diego. We crash our aircraft. We die. But we die as soldiers attacking a military target, not as terrorists murdering civilians." Ariazumi nodded slowly. "And you think that makes a difference? You think the Americans will care whether you died attacking a naval base or a city? You will still be dead. Japan will still lose the war. And this submarine will still return home in disgrace. So tell me, what is the point? Because we will know, Yamada said. When we die, we will know we refused to be monsters. That has to count for something. Ariazumi stared at them for a long time. Then he stood up. You have until 200 hours to sabotage the mission. I will make sure the night watch is elsewhere. But if anyone discovers what you did, I will deny all knowledge. You will be executed, and I will continue the mission with the remaining aircraft and whatever plague containers survive. Do you understand? Matsuoka stared at him in shock. Sir, you are giving us permission to sabotage? Ariazumi walked to the door. No, I am looking the other way while you do what I do not have the courage to do. There is a difference. 200 hours. April 23, 1945. Matsuoka and Yamada entered the hangar where the Seiren aircraft were stored. The plague cylinders were attached underneath each aircraft in specially designed racks. 360 cylinders. 10.8 million fleas. Yamada pulled out a wrench and started loosening the bolts holding the first cylinder. It is heavier than I expected, he whispered. Matsuoka helped him lower the cylinder to the deck. Inside, the fleas crawled over each other, making a sound like rustling paper. Yamada used the wrench to crack the seal. The glass split with a sound like breaking ice. Black fleas poured onto the deck, thousands of them, crawling in every direction. Both pilots jumped back. Get them into the bilge before someone sees, Matsuoka hissed. They used brooms to sweep the fleas toward the deck drains. Most of the fleas went down the drains. Some crawled up the walls. Some disappeared into gaps in the machinery. It took 20 minutes to clear the visible fleas. Then they started on the next cylinder, and the next, and the next. By 4:30 hours, they had broken 320 cylinders. The hangar deck was crawling with fleas. Matsuoka's arms were covered in flea bites. His skin was on fire with itching. We need to stop, Yamada said. The morning watch starts in 30 minutes. We cannot break all the cylinders. We leave 40 intact, enough to make it look like most were damaged by accident, but not enough to complete the mission. They cleaned up as best they could, swept the remaining visible fleas into the bilge, pumped the bilge overboard. Then they went to their bunks and pretended to sleep. At 0600 hours, the morning watch discovered the broken cylinders. Alarms sounded. Captain Ariazumi arrived and inspected the damage. His face showed appropriate anger. Who is responsible for this? He shouted. The maintenance crew stammered explanations. Pressure leak, structural failure. Nobody checked the seals before departure. Ariazumi listened. Then he made his decision. 320 cylinders destroyed. 40 remain intact. That is not enough to complete the mission as planned. We abort Operation Cherry Blossoms at night. New orders. We proceed to Ulithi Atoll. Attack the American carrier anchorage. Conventional weapons only. The pilots will carry regular bombs instead of biological weapons. Dismissed. Matsuoka and Yamada exchanged glances. They had done it. They had sabotaged the plague mission. But now they faced something potentially worse. Because Ulithi Atoll was defended by dozens of American ships, hundreds of anti-aircraft guns, and 3 pilots in slow float planes would not survive long enough to drop their bombs. This was still a suicide mission, but at least now they would die fighting soldiers instead of murdering civilians. That had to count for something. July 23, 1945. I-400 was 400 miles from Ulithi Atoll when everything changed. The submarine surfaced to recharge batteries and received a radio transmission from Tokyo. The message was brief. Mission aborted. Return to Japan immediately. Imperial Command. Ariazumi read the message 3 times. Then he called the pilots to his cabin. "The mission is cancelled," he said. "We are ordered back to Japan." "Why?" Matsuoka asked. "What happened?" Ariazumi did not answer, because he did not know. What he did not know was that 6 days earlier, on July 17th, America had successfully tested the first atomic bomb in New Mexico, and that bomb was already being loaded onto a B-29 bomber bound for Japan. The war was about to end in a way nobody had imagined, and I-400, the submarine that was supposed to change everything, was about to become irrelevant. August 6, 1945. 0200 hours. I-400 was submerged 300 miles east of the Mariana Islands when the radio operator received an encoded transmission from Tokyo. Captain Ariazumi was awakened and handed the message. He read it 3 times in the red glow of the radio room. Then he sat down on a metal bench and stared at the wall for 5 minutes without moving. The radio operator waited. Finally, he asked, "Sir, what are the orders?" Ariazumi looked at him. "The message says an American weapon has destroyed the city of Hiroshima. 1 bomb, 1 city, 80,000 people dead instantly. The entire city is gone." The radio operator's face went pale. "Sir, that is impossible. 1 bomb cannot destroy a city. The Americans are lying. It must be propaganda." Ariazumi shook his head slowly. "No, this is real. The Americans have developed a weapon that makes our submarine carrier obsolete. Our plague bombs obsolete. Everything we have been fighting for obsolete. 1 bomb, 1 city, and they have more." He stood and walked to the intercom. "All hands, battle stations, prepare to surface. We are returning to Japan immediately." But as he reached for the button, another thought struck him. What if this was the end? What if Japan surrendered? What would happen to I-400? What would happen to the crew? What would happen to him? They had just spent 3 months preparing to commit biological terrorism against American civilians. That was a war crime. The Americans would execute them all, unless nobody ever found out what they had planned to do. Ariazumi called Lieutenant Matsuoka and Lieutenant Yamada to his cabin. When they arrived, he closed the door and locked it. "The war is over," he said. "The Americans have a new bomb. 1 bomb destroyed Hiroshima. Tokyo is ordering all submarines to return to port. Within days, maybe hours, the Emperor will announce surrender. And when that happens, the Americans will capture this submarine. They will search it. They will find evidence of Operation Cherry Blossoms at night, and they will execute all of us as war criminals." Matsuoka and Yamada looked at each other. "Sir, we sabotaged the plague cylinders. There is no evidence." Ariazumi shook his head. "The 40 remaining cylinders are still in the hangar. The aircraft are still equipped with bomb racks designed for biological weapons. The mission documents are still in the safe. And when American intelligence interrogates the crew, someone will talk. They always talk. We have perhaps 48 hours before Japan surrenders. In those 48 hours, we need to destroy all evidence that Operation Cherry Blossoms ever existed." "What do you want us to do?" Yamada asked. Ariazumi pulled out a list he had been writing. "First, we destroy all remaining plague cylinders. Dump them into the ocean at 3,000 meters depth where nobody will ever find them. Second, we destroy all mission documents. Burn them. Scatter the ashes. Third, we disassemble the Siren aircraft and dump them overboard. Fourth, we remove the catapult and weld the hangar shut. We make this submarine look like a normal patrol submarine. And fifth, we threaten every member of this crew. Tell them if they ever mention Operation Cherry Blossoms, we will find their families and kill them. Make them more afraid of us than they are of American war crimes tribunals." Matsuoka stared at him. "Sir, You want us to destroy the aircraft? The aircraft we spent 2 years building? The aircraft that were supposed to save Japan? Ariazumi met his eyes. Japan is not going to be saved. Japan is going to surrender unconditionally. The Americans will occupy our country. They will put our leaders on trial. They will execute war criminals. And if they discover we plan to use biological weapons against civilians, they will execute us. So yes, I want you to destroy the aircraft, because I would rather die knowing we failed than die knowing we succeeded. August 7th, 1945. 1400 hours. I-400 surfaced in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The crew began bringing the sarin aircraft up from the hangar. Lieutenant Matsuoka stood on the deck watching the first aircraft being lifted by crane. The wings were folded, the floats removed, the engine cowling dented and scratched from 2 years of testing. He had flown this aircraft 23 times. He knew every control, every vibration, every sound the engine made, and now he was going to watch it sink to the bottom of the ocean. The crane operator positioned the aircraft over the water. Ariazumi gave the signal. The crane released. The sarin hit the water with a splash and immediately began sinking. The wings tilted. The nose went down. Within 30 seconds, the aircraft disappeared beneath the surface. Matsuoka watched until there was nothing left but bubbles. 1 down, 2 to go. But as they lifted the second aircraft, something went wrong. The crane cable snapped. The aircraft fell 15 meters and hit the deck with a metallic crunch. The fuselage buckled. The wings collapsed. Hydraulic fluid sprayed across the deck. And from the wreckage, dozens of fleas began crawling out. Black fleas, plague fleas, from the cylinders that were supposed to have been destroyed. Ariazumi ran to the wreckage. He looked inside the shattered fuselage. 3 plague cylinders were still mounted in the bomb bay, intact, unbroken, hidden underneath false panels where the sabotage team had missed them. He turned to Matsuoka and Yamada. "You told me you destroyed all the cylinders." Yamada's face went white. "Sir, we broke 320 cylinders. We left 40 intact in storage. We did not check the aircraft. We did not know there were cylinders already installed." Ariazumi stared at the fleas crawling across the deck. There were hundreds of them now, maybe thousands, spreading in every direction. "Get the flamethrowers," he ordered. "Burn everything, the aircraft, the fleas, the deck plating if necessary. I want every living organism on this deck dead in the next 10 minutes. Crewmen ran for flamethrowers. Within minutes, jets of fire were sweeping across the deck. The smell of burning metal and burning insects filled the air. The fleas popped and sizzled. The aircraft wreckage melted, but Ariazumi knew it was too late. Some of the fleas had already disappeared into gaps in the deck plating, into the ventilation systems, into the submarine itself. He called the chief medical officer. "Doctor, we have a biological containment problem. Plague-infected fleas have entered the submarine's internal systems. I need you to inspect every crew member for flea bites. Anyone showing symptoms of plague infection goes into quarantine immediately." The doctor stared at him. "Sir, if plague spreads through the submarine, we cannot surface. We cannot return to port. We will have to scuttle the boat and kill everyone aboard to prevent the infection from reaching Japan." Ariazumi nodded. "I know. Get to work." August 9th, 1945. 800 hours. The second American atomic bomb destroyed Nagasaki. The radio transmission from Tokyo was brief. 40,000 dead. City obliterated. Surrender negotiations beginning. All military forces prepare to cease operations. Ariazumi read the message and then burned it. The war was over, but I-400's war was just beginning, because 3 crew members were now showing symptoms, fever, swollen lymph nodes, the characteristic buboes of bubonic plague. Ariazumi called an emergency meeting with his senior officers. We have 3 confirmed plague cases. The infection is spreading. Within a week, half the crew will be dead. Within 2 weeks, everyone. We have 3 options. Option 1, we surface and radio for help. Tokyo sends a hospital ship. They quarantine us. But then the Americans discover what we were doing and execute us all as war criminals. Option 2, we scuttle the submarine. Everyone dies. But the plague dies with us. The secret stays buried forever. Option 3, we take this submarine as far from civilization as possible and wait for everyone to die. Then we scuttle the boat. Same result as option 2, but with more suffering. One of the officers raised his hand. Sir, what about option 4? We shoot the infected crew members, dump their bodies overboard, disinfect the submarine, and hope the infection does not spread further. Ariazumi stared at him. You want to execute our own men? The officer did not blink. Sir, they are already dead. Plague has a 90% mortality rate without antibiotics. And we have no antibiotics. We are just choosing between letting them die slowly or quickly. And if they die slowly, they will infect others. Better to sacrifice 3 men than lose 144. Ariazumi thought about this for a long time. Then he said quietly, Bring me Lieutenant Matsuoka and Lieutenant Yamada. When the 2 pilots arrived, he told them what was happening. 3 men infected with plague, spreading through the crew. The officer's proposal to execute them. He watched their faces. What do you think? Matsuoka looked sick. Sir, those men got infected because we failed to destroy all the plague cylinders. This is our fault. We should be the ones executed, not them. Yamada nodded. We agree. If anyone has to die to contain this infection, it should be us. We are responsible. Ariazumi studied them both. You would volunteer to be executed? Both pilots nodded. Ariazumi stood and walked to the porthole. He stared out at the ocean for a full minute. Then he turned back to them. No, nobody gets executed. We are going to try option 4 without the executions. We isolate the infected men in the forward torpedo room. We seal it completely. We cut off all ventilation. We wait 48 hours. If the infection does not spread further, we surface and call for help. If it does spread, we go with option 2. We scuttle the boat, all of us. But I will not execute my own crew, not after everything we have been through. August 11th, 1945. The 3 infected men were sealed in the forward torpedo room. Through the sealed door, Ariazumi could hear them coughing, crying, begging to be let out. But he did not open the door. He just sat outside, listening to them die. It took 26 hours. By the morning of August 12th, all 3 men were dead. The medical officer checked the remaining crew. No new infections. The quarantine had worked. The plague had been contained, but at a cost that would haunt Ariazumi for the rest of his life. August 15th, 1945. 1200 hours. Emperor Hirohito's voice crackled over the submarine's radio. The war was over. Japan had surrendered. Allied forces were coming to occupy the country. All military units were ordered to cease hostilities immediately and await instructions. Ariazumi gathered the crew on the main deck. They stood in formation. 141 men, 3 spaces empty where the plague victims had been. Gentlemen, Ariazumi said, the war is over. We lost. In approximately 2 weeks, American forces will arrive to take possession of this submarine. They will inspect it. They will interrogate us. And they will discover what we were planning to do. Unless we make sure they never find out. He gestured to the hangar. We have already destroyed 2 aircraft. The 3rd is damaged beyond recognition. All plague cylinders have been destroyed except the ones that infected our crew. Those bodies are still in the forward torpedo room. Tonight, we are going to dump those bodies into the ocean with full military honors. Then, we are going to weld the torpedo room shut, seal it permanently. If the Americans ask why, we tell them it was damaged in a depth charge attack, and we sealed it to prevent flooding. What about the mission documents? Someone asked. Ariazumi pulled a folder from his jacket. These are the last remaining copies of Operation Cherry Blossoms at night. Every order, every briefing, every piece of evidence that we planned biological warfare. He held the folder over a trash can and lit it with a match. The paper caught fire. Within seconds, the folder was ash. That is what we do to anyone who talks about this mission. Understand? The crew nodded silently. August 29th, 1945. I-400 surfaced 30 miles east of Tokyo Bay. American destroyers immediately surrounded the submarine. Sailors with rifles pointed at the Japanese crew. An American officer came aboard. He was young, maybe 25 years old. He walked the length of the submarine taking notes. Then he stopped at the sealed forward torpedo room. "What is behind this door?" he asked through a translator. Ariazumi answered smoothly. "That compartment was damaged in a depth charge attack off Okinawa. We sealed it to prevent flooding." "Can you open it?" the American asked. Ariazumi shook his head. "The welds are permanent. To open it would require cutting equipment we do not have. It would take days." The American made a note. Interesting submarine design. Very large. What was its primary mission? Long-range patrol, Ariazumi lied. We were hunting American supply convoys in the Central Pacific. The American looked at the bulge in the hull where the hangar was located. "What is this protrusion?" Ariazumi had prepared for this question. "Fuel storage. We were designed for extended patrol duration. That compartment holds 400 tons of diesel fuel. Can I see inside?" "No," Ariazumi said. "We emptied all fuel before surrendering. The compartment is full of fumes. Opening it would create an explosion risk." The American nodded. "That makes sense." He finished his inspection and returned to his destroyer. Ariazumi watched him go. They had gotten away with it. The Americans had no idea what I-400 was designed to do. The secret was safe. September 1945. I-400 was taken to Pearl Harbor for detailed examination. American engineers studied every system. They measured the hull, analyzed the engines, mapped the internal layout. But they never opened the sealed forward torpedo room. They never realized the fuel storage compartment was actually an aircraft hangar. They never discovered the remains of the catapult system. And they never found any evidence of biological weapons. The submarine that was supposed to change the war had become a curiosity, an interesting example of Japanese engineering, but nothing more. Lieutenant Kenji Matsuoka was interrogated 6 times by American intelligence. Each time, they asked the same questions. "What was your mission? Where did you patrol? Did you sink any American ships?" Each time, Matsuoka gave the same answers. "We were a reconnaissance submarine. We patrolled the Central Pacific. We engaged no enemy vessels." The Americans wrote down his answers and let him go. He returned to Japan in October 1945. He never spoke about Operation Cherry Blossoms at night, not to his family, not to his friends, not to anyone. The United States Navy decided I-400 was too large and too unusual to keep. They worried the Soviet Union would demand access to the submarine under post-war agreements, so they made a different decision. On May 28, 1946, I-400 was taken to sea off the coast of Hawaii. American sailors opened the ballast vents. The submarine began sinking. Within 3 minutes, I-400 slipped beneath the surface. Within 10 minutes, she reached the ocean floor, 2,300 feet down, the largest submarine ever built, the only submarine aircraft carrier in history, the weapon that was supposed to save Japan, gone forever, or so everyone thought. Because in August 2013, 68 years later, a research vessel from the University of Hawaii discovered the wreck of I-400 using deep-sea sonar. Marine archaeologists sent remote cameras down to examine the wreck. What they found shocked them. The sealed forward torpedo room still intact. The hangar compartment clearly visible. Evidence of a catapult system mounted on the deck. This was not a reconnaissance submarine. This was something far more sophisticated, something the Americans had never understood in 1945. The discovery triggered a new investigation. Japanese military archives were searched, American intelligence files declassified, and in 2015, documents about Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night were finally released to the public. The world learned that Japan had planned to attack California with biological weapons, that 3 young pilots had sabotaged the mission, that plague-infected fleas had killed 3 crew members, and that Captain Ariazumi had successfully hidden the truth for 70 years. Kenji Matsuoka died in 2003 at age 81. He never told anyone about his role in sabotaging the plague attack. His family found a sealed letter among his possessions after his death. The letter was dated April 1945. It read, "To whoever finds this letter, I am writing to confess something I can never confess while alive. I was ordered to commit an act of biological terrorism against American civilians. I refused. I sabotaged the mission, and I have spent the rest of my life wondering if I was a hero or a traitor. I suppose history will decide. But I want you to know this. Sometimes refusing to follow orders is the most courageous thing a soldier can do, even if nobody ever knows you did it." Captain Ariazumi committed suicide in 1949. The official cause was depression, but those who knew him understood the truth. He had spent 4 years carrying the weight of Operation Cherry Blossoms, the knowledge that he had almost murdered 100,000 civilians, the memory of 3 crew members dying of plague in a sealed torpedo room, the lies he told American interrogators. It had destroyed him. His final letter to his family contained one sentence: "I am sorry for everything." The wreck of I-400 still sits on the ocean floor off Hawaii, a tomb for the weapon that never fired, a monument to desperation and sabotage and moral courage, and a reminder that the most important victories are sometimes the ones that nobody sees. Because the mission that failed saved more lives than any mission that succeeded.